Henry, who in their right mind would ever want to become a founder? This
I
shit is
know.
so hard.
Yeah, many sleepless nights wondering that question. The honest truth for me is I feel kind of stuck here. I can't go back to a regular job.
I'm unemployable.
I can't do anything else. It feels that I've felt that way many times, but it's also just the personal freedom and the privilege to be able to control your own output and potentially influence people based on how you want to do it day to
Yeah.
day is pretty amazing. So I would say I think being in your right mind is maybe not the best way to describe it, but if I were to pick one reason, it's just the personal freedom. Obviously, it's hard and it's a roller coaster, but personal freedom is probably the best thing I can point
Yeah,
to.
I read this amazing book called Keeping Your Shit Together, which is by this relatively famous psychologist that studies entrepreneurs. And that's one of the big core motivating factors for a lot of us is this idea of, freedom, control, these kind of like fundamental things that we want to feel in our lives. The joke up front, right? Who in their right mind would do this? I think in so many ways, all of us are not in our right mind. In so many ways, it feels like a lot of us are masochists. We want to do something hard to prove to ourselves or other people, like we have some sort of chip on our shoulder. But I do have 6 reasons that I've been kind of like workshopping for the book as kind of a beware ye who enter here sort of chapter right up front about some reasons people might want to become entrepreneurs and discussing maybe why those things won't be found, by those things that you want to fulfill maybe won't be fulfilled by this journey. And so I want to run them by you, Henry, and the audience and get your take. The first one I have up is you want to be your own boss. This is one of the key motivators I feel like we have as entrepreneurs. You want to work for yourself and not the man. This goes to this idea of having freedom and flexibility over your time, over what you do. Yeah, not being beholden to any other individual. Do you feel like that's like a resonant part of why you feel like you want kind of this freedom and control?
Totally. That's, the main reason that I said
Mm-hmm.
is, be your own boss. Obviously, it's an illusion, right? There's some problems with that. The reality is a little bit more like you have many
Yes,
bosses
everyone
and
becomes your
many
boss.
responsibilities. Yes, which, I do understand the irony of it, but I also think that, being an entrepreneur, being your own boss, yes, you are still beholden to your clients or your customers or your employees or your investors. The list can go
Mm-hmm.
on. But at the end of the day, the thing that I kind of take solace in is one person is not going to be a blocker for me. I'm not going to be denied a promotion or advancement or success because my manager hates me or this one higher up doesn't want me to succeed or I don't have a good relationship with them.
Or the
Yes,
opportunities just don't exist where you're working, right?
Absolutely. It's as an entrepreneur, yes, I might have many bosses, but that's the point. That's good. That does give you the personal flexibility to decide who to hire, who to work with, who to, have as investors. So I get the irony, but I think it's important to differentiate the fact of, yes, you have many bosses, but you get to choose those bosses and you can fire those bosses if necessary sometimes.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and definitely the thing that I discuss in this part of that chapter, right? Like the irony of us wanting to be our own boss is that we actually fall into a situation where everyone is our boss, like we're beholden to our employees, our investors, our customers, all of these stakeholders. And now rather than just having one person that we need to impress or one roadblocker or one person that dictates our opportunities, the onus is a lot on us and a lot on managing this vast ecosystem that we have to create in order to fulfill that need for us, which I love what you said about how ultimately it is up to your in your control, right? Like you can, fire employees, like with cause, and you can fire investors if they don't own like a significant part of your company. Right? You can only really fire them at the early stage before you take their money. And you can definitely fire customers. I think this is one of the ones that in the freelance community, a lot of people talk about is when do you fall into a trap where a customer is just taking too much of your time and it's not worth the relationship. That is something that you can definitely control. The hard part about this is I think a lot of people, before they jump into entrepreneurship, don't understand that this is the type of relationship and framework that gets created, where you do have to manage this vast ecosystem. And the flip side of control is that all the pressure is on you too. All of the ability to create opportunity is all on you. And that type of responsibility for one's self and one's development and, overall happiness and stuff can be very difficult. So just something to call out about, cool, you want to be your own boss? Well, you can be your own boss, but it actually means that you have to do the thing that every boss does for everyone else, and for every other type of stakeholder, which can be difficult and is unintuitive.
Yeah, definitely true. Absolutely resonates. Taking on the risk and responsibility is what entrepreneurs are, kind of known for. That's almost the definition. Um, the thing that makes me feel a little bit better about this is no matter what, you can't avoid working with people for the most part. And so, one boss, many bosses, optional bosses, those are just relationships. Those are just people. Yes, they could be challenging at times, but to kind of say, oh, I don't want a boss in entrepreneurship. I'm going to have more bosses. So that seems worse. At the end of the day, these are people, embrace that, or else it's probably going to be hard for you to advance in your career or your professional goals. So I personally think this is my favorite motivation, but I do see the irony. So good to call out for people entering this
Yeah,
space, I
exactly.
guess you could
And
say.
I think this is something that's not often talked about. So, yeah, it's good that we can call that out for maybe some people up front. The second one that I want to talk about, the second major motivation that people often talk about when they talk about getting into entrepreneurship is you want to get rich. Now, it's kind of
Mm.
taboo in the startup and entrepreneurial community to talk about this motivation because it is so closely tied to, get rich quick schemes, grifters, people running Ponzi schemes, like all these things that are just in it to make a quick buck, right? We all want to believe that we're in this for something bigger, for, the service of customers and, the good of making something in the world, all that stuff. But for many of us, a fundamental motivating factor is money, right? Whether that's the freedom to make more money than you're allowed to as a employee at a company, or just to be financially free from another institution. So to profit off your own work instead of giving that profit to somebody else. What do you think about this one, Henry?
Yeah, I mean, this one definitely hits home. I feel like sometimes this is kind of obscured by saying, I want to create the biggest X, the biggest YouTube channel, the biggest
Yeah.
online business, whatever. But really, that's essentially equivalent to I want to become rich. I want to dominate something for capital gain.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
And
you know, the,
I
Go
was going
ahead.
to say, and the great irony, right, of this one, especially because you bring up things like YouTube channel, podcast, right? That's the industry that you live in. You know that the probability of achieving that is so small. The probability of achieving kind of anything great in these niche markets is like slim to none. Like most people that go into starting a YouTube channel or a podcast make absolutely no money. Most people make negative money, right? They invest so much time into this, and the opportunity cost of that time, they could have made significantly more than if they were continuing to shovel this into the podcast. And that's true of startups as well. Like most businesses run on razor thin margins. And usually because of just the way that businesses work, right? Like we talked about in the earlier motivation, wanting to be your own boss. Being your own boss comes with the responsibility of making sure that, your vendors are paid, your employees are paid, all those things before you, right? And that's like a tough
Mhm.
responsibility to deal with, and often means that entrepreneurs for a long time don't make any money from their businesses, even the ones that are slightly profitable. That's like one of the big pieces of irony. What do you think about that, Henry?
It's sad, but true. Whenever you're trying to replace your own direct output with something intangible, maybe, or potentially tangible in the form of an asset, which could be a business, that takes a lot of risk, takes a lot of luck. It's hard to actually bring that to reality. I think that that's almost the promise behind being an entrepreneur is you're going to work really hard. The odds are against you. It's going to be difficult, but you will be able to replace yourself. So managing all these people is going to be hard. Having all these responsibilities is going to be hard. But if you do find success, you'll be able to retire, or you'll be able to step
Mm,
away, have more personal freedom, have more work life balance, less risk, because you've built this asset that can then generate the passive income for
mhm.
you. The reality is, it's rare. It's really rare. So if that's your primary motivation,
Maybe look
we
elsewhere.
need to address.
Right? And this is something
Exactly.
I talk about in the book. Like if we just talk about startups specifically, we all know the whole 99% of startups fail, right? All that jazz. What that actually means in reality is you'll make negative money, probabilistically. And even for those that like do end up, hitting first lottery, which is, raising money, right? Which is such a big factor for so many startup founders, the expected value of your equity in a VC backed startup over a 7-year time horizon is $50,000. That's the expected value, which is the probability times the outcome. So for many of us, that's not life-changing money, right? That doesn't seem worthwhile, all that stuff. So if we were just going for getting rich, like the thing that is probabilistically most likely to get us rich is to go to a really good school, which a lot, may or may not have access to, go work in investment banking. Yeah,
Yes.
and do that in I think 4 different metropolitan areas where you're paid the most. So you have a much higher chance even of doing that, which, like there's tons of factors and luck that can go into doing those things, than to make a ton of money off of a business. And again, none of this is to dissuade you. Right. Henry and I are still here, like,
Fighting
and
the
forget
good fight.
fighting the good fight. We'll get to that. It's just if any of these is the primary motivating factor, the only thing that you're thinking about, the only thing that you're motivated by, there are other options for you. And I want to make sure you explore those before diving into the world of entrepreneurship and the masochism that is being a founder. Skipping on to number 3, Henry, because
Mhm.
there are other options. That's all right. We'll get there. But number 3 is you want to do what you love. Mm,
Yes.
powerful, right? This is the whole follow your passion. You'll never work a day in your life, all that jazz. The tough reality with this one that I'm sure you can resonate with, Henry, is that running a business to do the thing you love often takes all the fun out of the thing that you
Yeah.
love.
Yeah. I've recently been thinking a lot about that quote. I think it's Confucius. Maybe I totally made that up. The whole, you do what you love, you never work a day in your
Yeah.
life. Such a lie, such like misleading BS. It is absolutely not true, because work is work. Work is
Yeah.
stress. Even if you are a painter, we look at artists and, singers
Exactly.
and actors, they have very stressful lives, and they're doing something that is the most, artists. And, I it really grinds my gears hearing that idea of I'm just going to do what I love and my life will be
Yeah.
perfect. No, work is difficult. Building a business is even more difficult. Yes, you should be, initially excited about something and you should have some emotional connection, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just being negative, because it feels, this perspective of find what you love and build a business around it, that's rose colored glasses. And it just is so far from the reality. This is going to take a long period of time, a lot of hard work and dedication. Love isn't enough to get you through
Yeah.
that. And your love will fade incredibly
Yeah.
quickly. I've started many small businesses, and every time I get really excited about them, and they still are areas that I really have a deep passion for, but the actual minutia of running the business and having the operations and the accounting and the finances and the legal and the taxes do not make me love it anymore. So it's just, that's the cold hard reality.
Yeah. And there's something to be said about, that concept being so ubiquitous in kind of like the entrepreneurial community, right? The follow your passion, do what you love, you never work a day in your life. Like, why is that so resonant, right? And in some ways, I think it's meant to, in those early days, focus us, if we take an optimistic lens, focus us on the things that we care most about, right? And maybe try to find a place where we can be of service, and potentially start a business in those areas. Because the truth is, if you try to start a startup or start a company in an industry or with a customer base that you do not care about, love, or have any affinity for, this is going to be much, much harder, right? Like love won't get you all the way through, but love gets you through quite a lot.
Definitely. Yeah. That initial pain tolerance, you can get over the
Yeah,
hump for sure.
exactly. It's just like in, long-term relationships, right? Larry and I have been together for 11 years, right? And I think both of us would say we were so deeply in love with each other, but we would also say that our relationship takes work, right? Right? And those things are not mutual. Like it's in some ways important, to it's almost a way of showing love for the thing is to endure the work, right? Endure the most difficult parts. Like that's really how you do what you love long term is you get comfortable with the pain tolerance.
Yeah. No, that's an absolutely amazing point and good to frame it in that way, that love for the work is important to continue the
Yes.
work. Absolutely
Yeah.
true.
All right. Number 4, you want to work less. Oh,
Mhm.
Henry, my gosh, 16-year-old me was obsessed with this idea. You know,
Weren't
Yeah,
we all?
exactly. 2000s, like reading 4-hour work week, like all that stuff. Like, oh my gosh, I could work 4 hours a day and like sit on a beach. That feels fantastic. Reality, right? Right. Like most entrepreneurs, work way more than you would if you worked at a normal company. I have some stats that I put in the book that I'll say to you now, Henry, and then I'll get your thoughts. But most entrepreneurs work on average 67 hours a week, which, if you're listening and you've forgotten how much you're supposed to work a week in the United States, is 40 hours. That's full time
Yep.
work. And the most sad statistic, most haven't taken a complete unplugged vacation in 3 years. What do you think about that, Henry?
Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, getting me a little choked up here. But I think the problem with this lie, this one is, I think, maybe the biggest
Yeah.
lie out of the motivating factors, is it just is so far from the truth, and almost nobody experiences this. This is, I think, told to younger versions of you and I and many others of the get rich quick online course building where we're going to, generate all this passive income so that you can be on the beach.
Mhm.
That's not how real business works. That's not how any successful entrepreneur works. If you look at the icons of the entrepreneurship
Mhm.
space, they are CEOs of Fortune 100 companies. They work constantly. They have no balance in their life whatsoever. So even when you look at the most successful, this is so far from the truth. I still aspire to build a lifestyle
Mhm.
business where I do have this balance in my life, which is a huge priority. But that's a much different approach to entrepreneurship where I'm prioritizing multiple income streams, a ton of flexibility, working from
Mhm.
home, trying to keep headcount extremely low,
Mhm.
keep my responsibility extremely low, keep my investors almost at zero, if ever at all. So this one's tough. I'm not against working. I'm very career driven. I think so are
Mhm.
you. We like to work, but replacing your work entirely, passive income, I don't know, buy a rental property and tell me how it goes, because that's probably the best thing you could do for this.
Yeah, and then go watch some rental property YouTube videos because you'll realize that even owning a rental property is not passive income. So
Far from it.
really,
Far
really,
from
we
it.
live in a society where there is no such thing as passive income. That can be a difficult thing, to settle with. And some of you might be feeling like we're like full of complete garbage, and you watched a series of YouTube videos where a guy was selling you a course about how to make $100,000 a week with AI. Please link it down in the description. I'm sure, or down in the comments. Henry and I would love to take the
Hold
course.
it. Nope. Nope. I've seen it already. I've seen it already. Don't click that button. Yeah.
Oh
There's far
Lord.
too much of that. It's just not
It's just
true.
not true. And it's a hard thing to wrestle with, but the optimistic part, right? As we've been talking about, the flip side of all these things, you do have control. You do get to create flexibility. The thing that will like the end of this all is just to say that you might feel as an entrepreneur, like in normal everyday business and society, at a normal job, whatever, that it feels like some sort of like creative prison, and you want to break out, you want freedom and control over your life. And I've been there. I understand you. The thing that is hard to, wrestle with and recognize is that being an entrepreneur means you just get to create your own prison.
Yeah.
But that can still be, a wonderful experience that you get to shape. It's just making sure that you're cognizant of the traps, that you can often fall into, and make sure you avoid the ones that you don't want to be a part of. All right. Skipping ahead. Number 5, you want to help people. Some people, I think me included early on in my career, thought businesses were ways of, helping shape the world around us, doing positive things in the world. That's kind of what we're pitched often in university programs as well. Harsh reality is that the incentives of our economy and businesses are not meant to help people, but to profit off of them. That can be an unsettling thing to step into. It doesn't mean that businesses are all bad, but it does mean that it will be much harder for you to build one that is solely focused on helping people. Henry, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think as a young boy and a young entrepreneur, I really felt attached to entrepreneurship as my best way of making a
Positive
positive
impact.
impact on
Yeah.
others. The alternatives may be a career in healthcare or even law
Hmm.
or politics, industries that are directly
Activism.
tied to serving others. Okay, now that's a bit of a cheat code there, Drew, but that's the best example. But what I was kind of flirting with was all three of those examples, being a lawyer, being a doctor, being a politician. Those are all also fairly profit oriented at
Hmm.
times. Like it's hard to escape that kind of engine of capitalism that exists. So I felt like those all being true, the best way for me to kind of almost skip the line or have the best chance at influencing people was through starting my own business and not running for, office or something like that.
Right. Then play into an existing system, build my own system, get to set the rules, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Again,
And
I applaud that, right? I vibe with that. And that is possible, right? If this is your motivation, that is possible. It's just going to be probably much, much harder than you think. And Henry and I both know that from experience. Moving on to our last one, because we're getting close to time here. Number 6, kind of out of left field. Most people might not think about this, but you want to be seen. Now, what do I mean by seen? Seen means you want to have a big mark on the world. You want to make a big impact. You want to leave a legacy where people, remember you in some way, even in the less abstract future, right? Even in today, right? You want to be recognized for something, for being smart and talented and passionate and, all that stuff. Henry, does this resonate with you at all?
sure it does. Yeah, I think I've recently been reflecting on why people love athletes
Mm,
so much. I love sports. I love sports documentaries. I love the stories behind them. And I think fame is a component of that. And maybe there's another component of doing what you love, that passion, you know,
yeah.
option there of I love basketball. I'm going to play basketball for a living. Fantastic. Everyone would love to aspire to that. But I think that there's one thing where it boils down to, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. If you are a professional athlete, your goal is simple. And I think we're all trying to find that goal in life, or that purpose. If you're a professional tennis player, all you got to do is win. Just win the match, then win the next one, win the championship. Your life, even though it's very difficult and
Mm,
stressful, is clear. Your purpose is clear. I think that's very closely related to this idea of being seen, is knowing what's the vision, what's the purpose, what's my
hmm.
goal, and how can I get accolades for pursuing that goal. You don't have to win every single tennis match to be a beloved tennis player, but just making progress on that goal and having others appreciate that, I think is what we all want. Athletes encapsulate it very
Hmm.
well. Entrepreneurs, not so
Yeah, this
much.
is this is man's search for meaning, right? And so intertwined with this. The reality though, right, is the game is not straightforward, right? This is not an arena where it is very easy to become the top of the class, the biggest and the best, the world champion. There is no world champion of entrepreneurship. And so letting that settle in and then realizing that the odds, are stacked against you even more than to become a famous athlete, even more than to become a famous singer or actor. There are more people that start businesses and do this instead of that, and there are much fewer people that are household names or have left lasting legacies on the world. So if you are somebody that is struggling with this internal sense of this internal search for meaning, right, and to be seen, to be recognized for who you are, you should go to a therapist.
You had to say it.
I say this as somebody
Yeah.
that goes to therapy. Go to therapy, BetterHelp or whatever company wants to sponsor the podcast. We'll
Sure.
send loads of entrepreneurs over to therapists. So, Henry, at the close of this section of the show, why then are you and I still doing this? If the great irony of all of these core motivations is that, it is so unlikely that you will find the thing that you're looking for in entrepreneurship, why are we doing this?
Yeah, I think the question alone is very goal oriented. There's this certain outcome that I'm looking to achieve. I don't necessarily subscribe to that anymore.
Yeah.
I think that it is more about the journey.
Yes.
Like, I am pursuing entrepreneurship because I enjoy the day to day. I enjoy the small, freedoms that I get, the small victories that I achieve. That's what keeps me going right now. It's not necessarily an exit strategy or, some desire to be awarded with some 30 under 30.
Right.
I like the journey right now, and that could change, that could evolve, but focused on the now is kind of why I'm still on this
I
wheel.
love that. For me, it's that I like to make stuff. That's always been a core part of who I am. And entrepreneurship gives me the freedom, flexibility, and in some ways, resources, the infrastructure to be able to make stuff that actually seemingly can contribute to people's lives. And that's exciting. And I think in some ways, I do enjoy the masochistic, kind of parts of I'm someone that really struggles with moral quandaries and dilemmas. Let me go into an industry where that nuance is constantly hard to find. And hence why I'm writing a book about that.